Dr. Abhishek Singhvi.
Mr. Chairman, sir, I congratulate my colleague who sits on the same bench as all of us here on moving this composite resolution, raising several issues. And while I can't say that I agree with every issue which he has raised, there are several there which require our deep consideration in greater measure. The first and obviously the most important is the issue of backlog and arrears. I remember long ago Nani Palkiwala used an evocative phrase which I think typified the problem. And he said that justice is supposed to be blind, but in India it can be also considered lame because it hobbles along at a pace which would be considered slow in a community of snails. And he added that if litigation were added as a sport in the Olympics, India would surely get a few gold medals. But sir, the problem is really, if one was to give these figures to any other audience than Indian, it would be frightening. I have some figures here with me, and they are truly, the pendency figures should frighten us out of our lives. Happily, of course, most of these figures are really numbers on a file, and if they are properly screened and tracked, they would disappear, since a large number of them are not live, are moot and infructuous. But kindly consider the figures. The figures are that there are about 2 crore 98 lakhs cases pending in all the courts put together today, of which about 2.6 crores are pending in the lowest tier. The Supreme Court, just like you have many Indias in one, you have many judiciaries in one, the Supreme Court has a figure well under 50,000, maybe 46,000, 49,000. The High Courts put together have about 38 lakhs or 40 lakhs, and the subordinate courts have about 2.6 crores, making a grand total just under 3 crores. Now we know these figures and we know these debates, and we've had so many discussions and symposia and seminars. But unless we understand the real nature of the problem, why this occurs, the principal causes, we can never begin to solve them. The problems are very severe, but the causes appear to be so remarkably simple that one wonders why they have not been solved. The principal cause, if you go to a hospital, you can't run a hospital without enough doctors. Well, one of the principal causes is you can't run a judicial system which for the whole country, the higher judiciary is less than 850, 860 people. For the entire country of 1 billion plus people. And out of those 850 people, there is an affidavit filed in the Supreme Court 5-7 years ago. At no point of time since independence, at no point of time, and in those days the total strength was about 750. From independence till that date in about 2002, there were always 150 to 170 vacancies out of those 750. Today, out of 866 total strength of all the higher judiciary, we have 266 vacant, which means over 1/3 of an already very small figure of judges is permanently vacant, unappointed, non-functioning in this country of 3 crore arrears. What is worse, this would be again comical if it were not tragic in our country. Some time ago we increased the sanction strength of our high courts, for example. The sanction strength is the total number of persons you can have. Now the number was increased by some 10-20%. Well after the number is increased, we have not even fulfilled the total appointment of the original unincreased strength. That is the fate. And if you see the current figures, as on October 08, as I said, 266 vacancies were there out of 866. But now I come to the really sad part, a part which the many Indias in one and the many judiciaries in one always ignores, the subordinate judiciary. In the subordinate judiciary, for a country like this, with a huge population but a very large litigating population, we have a total of how many judges in subordinate judiciary? Guess. About 16,000. Out of the 16,000, over 3,500 vacancies. So again, over 1/3. Now how, I ask myself, can you run a hospital without doctors, a judiciary without judges? As Mr. Joyce rightly said, you know the date of retirement of a judge on the day of his appointment. On the day of his appointment, you know when he is to retire. We have to work towards a system that we have a notification of a successor at least 1 month before the retirement of the incumbent. And that should not be impossible. Today, if I was to pinpoint, there are 3 major causes. There are many other causes, but there are 3 major causes for the huge arrears problem in this country. The first is a lack of coordination between the various appointing authorities, if I may use that phrase, or the various consultees. Because even under the Supreme Court judgment by which the judiciary is to appoint the judiciary, there is a consultation process, there is an exchange of views, and that consultation process is not coordinated, is delayed, is frequently repetitive, and is aborted. The second major cause is a pathetically low judge to population ratio. We have now reached somewhere around 11 or maybe 12 or 11 and a half judges per million of population. The minimum, or at least the decent paradigm for judiciary, after all, judiciary is a service. It is just like having doctors or any other kind of service. Well, the minimum decent paradigm acceptable is 50 judges per million of population. That's the global norm. Countries have many more than that, but a lot of countries have at least 40, 45, 50. We are now at 11 and a half or 12. Way back in 2002, the All India Judges case, the Supreme Court has given several directions, and several times one of the principal directions was to achieve 50 judges per population at least within 1 or 2 or 3 years. We still function at a very low figure. So that is the second major reason. And the third major reason is an abysmally small amount of expenditure for the judicial sector. And here again, the figures are interesting. The plan expenditure in the 9th plan on the judicial sector increased from 0.07%. It's not 0.7%, it's 0.07% is the planned expenditure on the judiciary in the 9th plan. It went up in the 10th plan to 0.07, and in the 11th plan, in the 10th plan to 0.078, and in the 11th plan, that is the plan just before the current one, to 0.07%. So today, after much pushing and prodding, we are having a 0.0% expenditure on the judiciary. Now, if you have unfilled vacancies which are more than 1/3 in the higher judiciary and the lower judiciary, if you have an abysmally low expenditure, and if you have a pathetically low judge population ratio, how can you possibly have disposal? These 3 things have to be solved. I don't see why they should not be solved. For example, on the funding issue, there is a study. Justice M.J. Rao, who was then heading the Law Commission of India, he studied the problem in terms of figures alone. And for 2005, he found that the total investment required for clearing the backlog of all high courts and all subordinate courts would be 2,100 crores. And the annual recurring expenditure for 5 years, if you attacked the problem, would be an additional 875 crores for 5 years. Now, given the fact that a judicial sector has a across-the-board effect on every aspect of our life, on our economy, on our commerce, on our infrastructure, on our development, and of course for the common citizen, this, with utmost respect, I would say, Mr. Chairman, sir, is peanuts. It should not only be sanctioned by the government immediately, it should be implemented on a war footing. The reasons are not far to seek. I have pointed out the 3 reasons. The solution is therefore equally simple. The funding part I have just given you, 2,100 crores at that time, maybe 3,000 crores now. The second problem, we need a monitoring person, a senior person who simply monitors the file movement between the various consultees for the appointment process to ensure that simple principle that 1 month before the incumbent retires, the successor is notified. That can be done by a monitoring person appointed by the judiciary who will coordinate with the judiciary, because as you know, for example, to the Supreme Court appointment, you need a consultation process which extends from the various Supreme Court collegium to the central government and between them. For a High Court appointment, it involves the state government, the state High Court Chief Justice, the Supreme Court Collegium and the central government. This coordination to keep the file moving all the time, either way, you may not appoint X, you may appoint Y, whoever you appoint, but the appointment must come 1 month before the successor, before the incumbent retires. And that simple thing will mean that every minute at least 1/3 more of your sanctioned available strength is working, which should have been working all along. Mr. Chairman, sir, there are other several issues. There is an article in our constitution, a very simple article, but strangely hardly ever used. It's Article 224A. It permits a High Court Chief Justice, in consultation with a central government, to appoint ad hoc judges to his own High Court. Those ad hoc judges can be retired judges from his own High Court, they can be ex-judges from other High Courts. It requires the Chief Justice to seek. Now the retired judges also present a ready-made pool. I am not making this suggestion as a substitute for appointing new persons. That is the best. That must be done. But if you are not able to appoint new persons to 1/3 of the posts, if they go begging, because whether there is politics, whether there is ego, whether there is fights, whether there is lobbying, whether there is consultation delay, whatever the reason, at least you have a ready-made pool of retired judges who can be used to simply fill up the vacancy, and many of these people are decent, they have no great expectations, they will leave in the short period available after the ad hoc appointment, they can dispose of cases because they have retired after being judges for 10, 15, 20 years. In England, for the lower judiciary, they have a concept of recorders. Recorders are senior QCs, what we call senior advocates in this country. The senior QCs there called recorders on the lower side, on the criminal side, sit as something like a magistrate, they are called recorders, and dispose of hundreds of thousands of criminal cases, and they leave the bench after 2-3 years. Now this is the kind of use which this country has to do. The lower judiciary, of course, is in very bad shape. And I am very sorry to say, while the senior judiciary in India does a lot of work, while they work more than perhaps any other judicial system, they always have to have a care and to look out for the subordinate judiciary, which has neither a voice nor a say in all of this. If you were to treat the High Court judges or the Supreme Court judges even half or 1/3 as what you are, if you were to give them, treat them even half as badly or 1/3 as badly as you are treating a subordinate judiciary, there would be a judicial revolt. Kindly consider, most of our lower judiciary today functions in courtrooms where there are no air conditioning. There are pan-stained walls, there are cobweb dirt, and they dispose of hundreds of cases in very oppressive atmosphere, and they do a good job. And there you have a 1/3 vacancy. Recently, I was happy to know that this Parliament increased 3 times the perks and benefits of judges, roughly. A Supreme Court judge's salary went from 33,000 to 90,000. A High Court judges went same way. Chief Justice of India, Chief of the High Court. We welcome it. That is comparable to the best in the world. But when you did it, did you pause and shed one tear for the lower judiciary? Who looks after their interests? They have to dispose of 2.6 crores of your cases. And there is not one person here or in the judiciary who speaks for them. Now those are people, because they come by, they come under the state governments. The state governments are prodded, they all give the usual plaintive cry of lack of funds. So I would have said, and I have said so officially, and I have no hesitation in saying so here, that the senior judiciary should have said, the higher judiciary, yes, this is a good thing that you have increased our terms and conditions, and this should have been done long ago, and we all support it. But we will not take it unless there is at least a 50% increase in the terms and conditions of the lower judiciary. That would be really a proper signal and a proper message to the country as a whole. And ultimately, these are people, because they have no lobbies and they don't go on strike and they can't go on strike. If you were to do this with your labor class, you would know the lesson in a short while. Mr. Chairman, sir, I know my time is limited, and my friend Mr. Nayak has been good enough to cede his slot to me. I'll try to be as quick as possible. The other aspect, of course, is to continue to press on with our bypasses. As you know, litigation is like a clogged artery in India. When your artery is clogged, you go to the surgeon for a bypass. The bypass was originally the arbitration, which was supposed to be a bypass to litigation. Thereafter, we found that the bypass itself got clogged. The artery which you made for bypass arbitration is highly clogged. Today, arbitration means, in today's context, as lawyers know, a pre-litigation litigation. It means double litigation. First you litigate in arbitration, then you litigate in litigation. So now you must develop a second bypass, which has been developed to some extent, but we need to expand it, the bypass to arbitration itself, which is ADR or CDR, alternative dispute resolution or consensual dispute resolution. There, of course, good work has been done in one area. That one area is, of course, our Lok Adalats, and from 1982, for the last 25 odd years, on an all-India basis, the Lok Adalats have disposed of 2.4 crore cases. That's a fantastic figure. 2.4 crore cases in 6,58,000 Lok Adalats since 1982. But we have, on the basis of a report of a committee, which I had the honor to co-author, a Government of India committee, led to the amendment of the Civil Procedure Code, by which we have now Section 82, which provides a whole menu of other ADRs, like judicial settlement, like mediation, like conciliation. The numbers there are extremely small. They run in tens, not even in hundreds. Now, of course, you are increasing by initiative in individual high courts, the mediation. But there is no all-India scheme tying up the whole thing. Those other forms of conciliation, mediation, for which Lok Adalats cannot work, because Lok Adalats work best for petty issues, for motor vehicle claim, accident claims, for land acquisition matters. But for corporate matters or middle-level matters, Lok Adalats don't work. So we have to develop, in quantity terms, the issues regarding mediation, conciliation, and other forms of what is known as ADR or CDR, which is the bypass to the bypass. Mr. Chairman, sir, the solutions have to be multi-pronged, they have to be consistent, and we have to decide on an all-India policy and carry it on for at least 5 years or 3 years. If we make zigzags of policy, we will have no result. And the policy has to be holistic, not piecemeal. It has to be IT, computerization, case flow management tracking, vacancies, appointment and time, funding issues, ADR, CDR, all together. And now, of course, we have Gram Nyayalayas, which the Honorable Law Minister has piloted, and of course, we have fast-track courts, which the former Law Minister has piloted. So a combination of all these things should lead to a difference. May I end very quickly by adding on two more things. There is, in Mr. Darda's resolution, there are 2 or 3 more issues. One is the age issue. I have myself, just a few months ago, as a private member's bill, moved a constitutional amendment for equating 62 to 65 for High Court judges. I have found it laughable, I have found it bizarre, I have found it unthinkable how a High Court judge retires at 62 and a Supreme Court judge retires at 65. And the same High Court judge becomes a Supreme Court judge. It is not supposed that his same mind degenerates at 62, functions better at 65. The reverse can be true, but this can't be true. And what is the basis for this system, I have never understood. Apparently, the only basis I can give it is that some section of the bureaucracy have raised objection. If you raise 62, raise our age also. I think this is an absolute red herring. A bureaucracy, we always talk about independent judiciary, a third wing, a third organ. What is the connection with the services, service terms of the bureaucracy? So therefore, we have to, and let me tell you, the functional reality, as some of us who practice law in the courts know every day, a large part of the unseemly practice of the judiciary, what I might call, with utmost respect, the politics of the judiciary. The politics of the judiciary can sometimes make the politics of politicians blush. The politics of the judiciary would be considerably diminished if we did not have a 62 and a 65 hiatus. If both retired at 65, a large part of the lobbying we see today in terms of appointments, a large part of the weaknesses, a large part of the anxieties, insecurities. And today, life expectancy has increased in India way beyond when this constitutional provision was made. In most countries, the normal retirement age is 70. Well, very well, you need not consider 65 at the moment, but certainly 62 would be indefensible. So on all points of view, this should be immediately done and it will improve, as it is, a large part of your vacancy problem, because you will be continuing for longer with the judges. There is no reason why RTI should not apply to the judiciary, a third issue raised by Mr. Darda. Our committee, whose chairman sits with me here, Mr. Sudarshan Nachappan, of which I am a member, we have recommended long ago There is no question of the RTI not applying to judiciary. Everybody is subject to that, and of course, a valid distinction exists. The RTI will apply only on the administrative decisions of the judiciary. Obviously, it is not to apply to the judicial decisions of the judiciary. But there is no earthly reason why the RTI should not apply. It is now being applied in a very partial, piecemeal manner on the basis of some kind of a individual case decision, because I file an application, I don't get a reply, I file a petition, the petition is decided. But otherwise, there is no uniform application of the principle, and I think that should be done very quickly. Mr. Chairman, sir, I'm very grateful for the time given to me. I will only conclude by saying this, that this is an area where actually reform can be quick, it can be effective, and the results and the benefits of the reform will be far, far more far-reaching than in any other sector. The cost-benefit ratio of this reform is all in favor of benefit. The cost is infinitesimal. We can't afford to wait a minute. It's a solvable crisis, but the crisis is truly humongous. And therefore, I think all efforts, including efforts like this by way of resolution or private members' bills, are welcome. But the ultimate important thing is, where do we stand on action, on implementation? That's where India always, as usual, has to consider its options, because we are always either an argumentative country like Amartya Sen or an over-legislated country, but we have to be now an implementational country. Thank you very much.
Yes.